Hi folks, HR Funk here. Ever since I posted my recent review of my brand new CZ P09C Nocturne pistol, one of the most common viewer requests I've had is to compare this brand new CZ against my CZ P01 pistol that's about 25 years old, or at least the design is 25 years old at this point. I have had this pistol for probably 5 or 6 years now, and I thought in the interest of continuing my new versus old series, this would make a great subject. So in this video, I'm going to be comparing these two handguns. I'll be shooting them side by side out here on the range, and by the end, I'll try to tell you which one I think is the best CZ. But first, let's head back to the shop for a close-up look at our two contestants. I'll tell you all about their features and characteristics, then we'll come back out here and start shooting. Here are the P01 and the P09C Nocturne head-to-head on the bench, and the thing that strikes me when I see these two handguns close together is in looking at their various controls and contours and overall configuration, you really can see the shared design lineage between these two handguns, but also there are a lot of differences, and I'm going to be covering those in a sort of top-down fashion, the way I typically do when I conduct a handgun review. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on all the features of each of these handguns though, because they each have their own dedicated review. In fact, I'll put a link in the comment section of this video, so if you haven't seen those reviews and you want to, you can go back and watch all of that detailed information that I've already put up about each one of these two CZ pistols. For anyone who doesn't already know, the P01 is the older of these two designs, and as the name implies, it was developed in 2001, and it's really nothing more than a compact version of the CZ75 pistol, but the P01 was intended for use by military and law enforcement organizations, and the design was really optimized for that use. It went through some very rigorous testing, and a couple of years later, I believe it was in 2003, it was approved by NATO for use by NATO troops, and you can see it's still emblazoned with an NSN number right there, so it still maintains that NATO approval to this day. In the back is the P09C Nocturne, and the P09C is a descendant of the P07 pistol that predated it. The P07 was developed in 2009, and really the P07 was nothing more than the P01 design rendered in a polymer frame format. And as I said a moment ago, you can see a lot of similarities between these two handguns when you're looking at them. The big difference between the P09C Nocturne and the prior P07 pistol is the fact that the P09C Nocturne has a slide that is machined to accept an optic, and you can see that I have one mounted there. Obviously, there is no provision for an optic on the P01. Before I start to talk about the differences between these two handguns, let's talk about some of the similarities, because as I said, they are really the same basic design, just one of them is constructed with an alloy frame and the other has a polymer frame. They are both chambered for the 9mm Parabellum cartridge. They both are based on the short recoil locked breech modified Browning action. They are both a double action first shot and single action for successive shot trigger system. They both come from the factory with 15-round magazines. The P09C can use the P01 magazines, and in fact I demonstrated that in my original review of the P09C Nocturne, but the P01 cannot use the P09C magazines. So there is magazine compatibility from the 01 to the 09, but not from the 09 to the 01. Both the P09C and the P01 have an accessory rail that is incorporated into the forward portion of the frame, and both of these accessory rails have only one slot. So unlike some pistols where you have 2 or 3 slots so you can move things forward and backward, you do not get that with either one of these two handguns. Now, fortunately, the light that I have mounted on the P01 and the light laser combo that I have back here on the P09C have some adjustment that is built into the clamp, which is a part of the light and or laser. If you don't have that level of adjustability, then you might need to make sure that whatever you're going to be using, assuming you want to mount something, is going to position everything properly. Otherwise, it might not be a satisfactory setup with either one of these handguns and whatever your preferred accessory might be. Comparing the dimensions of these two pistols, as you might expect, they are very, very similar in terms of their overall length. In fact, I think they are virtually identical in terms of overall length and barrel length. The P09C has a slide that is a little bit taller than the P01, and that's probably not surprising considering the slide had to be modified somewhat in order to accommodate an optic. Also, the locking system between the P01 barrel and slide and the P09C barrel and slide is different. The P01 uses a locking lug that is similar to a 1911 style pistol, whereas the P09C locks the hood of the barrel into the slide in order to accomplish lockup. So I think that too requires the slide to be a little bit beefier on the P09C than it does on the P01. The P09C is a little bit thicker, I believe, although if you measure them at the absolute thickest or widest point, there's probably not a whole lot of difference there. You notice that overall the contours of the P01 frame are just a little bit more blended, a little bit more rounded, whereas the P09C is a little bit blockier. Aesthetically, I think the P01 looks better, but functionally there's probably not a whole lot of difference between the two. They both use the standard mechanical 3-dot sight system, and the sights on both of these pistols have the light gathering paint. When these sights are in the light for a period of time, they gather light, and then when you go into a darkened environment, they will glow for some period of time, but neither one of them are tritium night sights that will glow for a long time, like tritium will once they're introduced into that dark environment. The rear sight of the P09C is also serrated to keep down on glare, although I've got to say, with the non-serrated rear sight on the P01, I don't think I have ever experienced glare coming off that sight that caused me any problem when I'm shooting it, but that is present on the P09 and not on the P01. Speaking of the slide, we can also see that the serrations on the P09C are deeper and wider than they are on the P01. With this slide being not quite as tall, there's a little less there to grab a hold of, but there's really no problem cycling the slide. I don't think I've ever not been able to hand cycle this either to chamber around or whatever I might be doing with it at that given time. But the slide serrations are much more, I guess I'll use the word aggressive, on the P09C than they are on the P01. When CZ developed the P07 pistol, which again was the precursor to the P09C Nocturne that you see here in front of you, they also decided to modify the trigger action, which had been in use at that time in CZ75 pattern pistols for quite a few years, in fact probably a couple of decades prior to that. And when they changed the trigger system, they gave it a new designation. They called the new trigger system the Omega trigger, and the Omega trigger differed from the original in that it was a more simplified action that was a little easier to build and maintain, which I'm sure made it also a little less expensive. And also, it allowed the pistol to be reconfigured from a decocker style that you see here to a system that used a manual safety, and when it was converted, the manual safety could be used to carry the pistol cocked and locked, where the hammer is in the fully cocked position, the thumb safety is engaged, and then the pistol can be fired single action by disengaging the thumb safety and squeezing the trigger. I never modified this pistol to be used with the thumb safety, but it is possible. The parts came along with it. And this is the Omega style trigger still in the P09C Nocturne. Whereas the P01 does not have the Omega trigger. This is the standard CZ75 pattern trigger that has been in use for a long, long time. In fact, I think it goes back to the early 1980s when the original CZ trigger action was modified at that time. When CZ developed the Omega trigger system, it sparked a controversy that I believe goes on to this day, because while a lot of people thought the Omega trigger felt a little bit better on the stock pistol coming out of the box, it could not be tuned to the same degree as the traditional CZ75 style trigger action. And there are some people that very much like to tune these triggers, especially if they're going to be using them for competition. And as I said, the Omega trigger could not be tuned to the same degree as that traditional trigger. So the fact that the P09C Nocturne has the Omega trigger and the P01 does not is a notable difference between these two handguns, and there are some shooters who will prefer one or the other just based on the fact that one has the Omega trigger and the other does not. Also, the P09C is somewhat more ambidextrous than the P01. You can see the decocker on either side of the P09C, whereas on the P01 it is only set up on the left side of the pistol. Now, one thing I like better about the decocker on the P01 is there's a little bit more room here between the decocker lever and also the slide stop. Something that I've done a couple of times when I'm running the P09C and I'm attempting to decock it, I accidentally reach up and I'm pushing down on the slide stop, and of course that does nothing to decock the pistol. Now that's a little bit of a training issue and a little bit of a get acquainted issue. I'm sure as I get more and more accustomed to using the P09C, I'll get more used to using that decocker. But on the P01, where it's located more toward the rear of the frame, it just seems to be a little bit more natural motion. It gives me a little bit more room for my thumb, and I've never had an issue with trying to push down on the slide stop in order to decock the hammer of the P01. Both the P09C and the P01 have a reversible magazine catch, so that can be swapped either way, so they both have that measure of ambidexterity. Neither one of them have an ambidextrous slide stop, and as I mentioned during my review of the P09C, that is the way this is disassembled for cleaning and maintenance, so I don't know if there's really a convenient way to make this an ambidextrous slide stop. Either way, they are both set up for a right-handed shooter, and I don't think left-handed shooters are going to have that much trouble adapting to just using the slide stop. Probably the biggest difference I noticed between these two pistols has to do with the way they feel in my hand. The P09C is definitely the lighter of the two by a few ounces, and I think this is something like 24 ounces, and the P01 is 28 ounces, both of which would be unloaded weights. But I don't think it's possible to execute a grip in polymer that's going to feel quite as good as this grip does with the alloy frame and these very, very nice rubber grips. And I know some people like to swap out these grip panels for G10 material and something that's got a very coarse texture that is going to allow a much more firm grasp of the handgun. But I have always really liked these rubber grip panels. They're very similar to the ones that are on my CZ75 pistol. And between the shape and contour of the grip frame and those very soft and very tactile rubber grip panels, it just feels so much better in my hand than this grip on the P09C. That's not to say this is a bad feeling grip, and this one of course has a lot of texture that is molded into the grip frame, but it just does not feel as good as that traditional CZ75 style grip on the P01. And that's probably not even a fair comparison, because I think the CZ75 and also by inheritance the P01 have some of the best feeling grips that allow some of the most natural pointing of any handguns that have ever been developed. So again, not bad on the P09C, but it is certainly not as good, at least in my hand, as the P01. Both of these pistols have a trigger guard that is undercut at the rear to allow the shooter to get a higher grasp on the pistol. Both of them also have a textured forward area on the trigger guard, so anyone that prefers a finger forward hold has that for a little bit more traction for their finger. Both of them also maintain the grip tang at the rear of the grip, and this is something I mentioned during my review of the P09C. I like that being there. It adds a measure of controllability and also a measure of protection for the shooter's hand. Both of these also have a lanyard loop, and the lanyard loop, particularly on the P09C, is a source of contention for some shooters, but it doesn't bother me being there at all. And I think the last thing I'll mention in this shop comparison is the fact that the magazine for the P09C has this textured area at the bottom to allow the shooter to get a good grasp on there if it needs to be forcibly removed from the magazine well. But, not to be outdone, the P01 also has a relatively large magazine base plate, and you can get a hold of that thing if you need to and also remove it. There's no texturing, but there's enough surface area there that you can get a good hold of the magazine base plate and pull it out if you need to. And it's now time to start shooting these two pistols and see how they're going to stack up against each other head to head. The ammunition for today's test is 115 grain Blazer brass, and this was donated by friend of the channel, Shane. He actually donated 200 rounds of this ammunition specifically for this video. Thank you, Shane, very much. This is an invaluable contribution, and I have said for the longest time that I have the best viewers on the internet, and Shane's generous contribution for this video is just the latest in a long chain of evidence to bear that out. In any case, I'm going to start out with an accuracy test from a distance of 15 yards. I'm going to begin with the P01, and I'm going to be shooting all these shots single action. And the P01 is going to be fired with iron sights. There is no provision, as I said back in the shop, for an optic on this pistol. And I will be shooting the P09C Nocturne with the optic. Again, all the shots will be single action. So this should be kind of an interesting comparison. I'm going to be testing optic against mechanical sights and new versus old. Let's see what the accuracy looks like. Here we go, 5 rounds from 15 yards, starting with the P01. That's 5 downrange from the P01. Now I'm going to have to change my target camera, and I'll start with the P09C. Camera adjustments are now complete, and it's time to see how the CZ P09C Nocturne is going to perform from this distance of 15 yards. Let's find out. And there's 5 from the P09C. I can tell you already, the P01 has a nicer single action trigger than the P09C. Let's go down range and take a look at the groups. How about that kickoff for the P01? I have always found that to be a very accurate pistol, and it definitely demonstrated that here. The mechanical sights were no handicap whatsoever. That is a 1 1/4 inch group center to center for 5 shots from the distance of 15 yards, and actually it's a little closer to 16 yards than 15. I didn't feel like trying to move that extremely heavy bench. The 5 shots for the P09C aren't bad. 4 of the 5 shots are in about 2 inches center to center. This one down here opens it up to about 2.5. So definitely the P01 wins the pure mechanical accuracy from that distance of 16 yards, firing from the bench. Now let's move on to some defensive drills and see how both handguns do on those. All of the defensive drills are going to be initiated with my shot timer, and I'll be keeping track of the entire elapsed time to fire out all the shots required in that particular drill. I'll be beginning each time with the pistol in double action mode, so after the first shot I'll have to manage the trigger transition and then fire all the successive shots in single action mode, obviously. So we're going to be looking at the elapsed time and the accuracy that I'm able to achieve with each of these handguns. I'm starting out with controlled pairs at a distance of 5 yards. Let's see what happens. .44, 1.44 seconds. 1.31, 1.31 seconds. And 1.17 for that last controlled pair with the P01. And all of those shots are 3-point heart shots. I didn't give the scoring for this before. Anything on the heart is worth 3 points. Any designated headshot inside of this circle is worth 3 points. Anything on the lungs is worth 2 points. Anything on the silhouette outside of the heart and lungs is worth 1 point, and anything completely off the silhouette is worth 0 points. So this is a perfect score. All 6 shots are on the heart. This one just touched the line, so that counts as 3. So that's a total of 18 points for the P01 on that first drill. Next up is a multiple adversary drill, also fired from a distance of 5 yards. This requires the shots to be fired in a very specific order. On initiation from my shot timer, I'm going to fire 1 shot at the target on the right, then 3 shots at the target on the left, then 2 more shots at the target on the right. I'll keep track of the overall elapsed time, and we'll take a look at the accuracy. Here we go. Total elapsed time, 3.06 seconds, 3.06. All 3 of the shots on target number 1 are 2-point lung shots. This one has some tears that went down to the line of the heart, but the bullet itself did not break the line. So these are all worth 2 points, so that's 6 points for target number 1. And I've got 3 really good heart shots over here on target number 2, so those are each worth 6 points. So, or excuse me, each worth 3 points. So 9 and 6 is 15 for the P01 on stage number 2. And I'm now back to a distance of 7 yards, and from here I'm going to be firing failure drills. This is 2 shots to the body and 1 shot to the head in rapid succession. This simulates a circumstance where 2 shots to the body do not stop a hostile aggressor, and the final shot to the head is necessary in order to eliminate that threat. So I'll be initiating things once again with my shot timer. I'll be starting off with the P01 in double action mode. Let's see what happens. .18, 2.18 seconds. Ooh, blew the headshot that time. That one gets a goose egg. 2.14 seconds. And 2.36 seconds. For the P01 on those failure drills, I've got 2 good heart shots here, so those are each worth 3 points. This is a 1-point shot, even though it's right dead center through the spine. It is not on the heart or lungs. So that's 6, 7, 9, 11, 13, and then I've got 2 good 3-point shots here, so that brings it up to 16, and this one gets a 0. That's the first bad shot I've had with the P01. We'll see if that's going to be the deciding factor when I get all the way done with all the drills. Next up, also from 7 yards, is going to be a reloading drill. This time, on initiation of my shot timer, I'm going to fire 2 rounds, then perform an emergency reload and fire 2 more rounds. All these shots are going to be to the body. I'm going to be starting again, as always, in double action mode. Let's see what happens. Total time, 5.30 seconds, 5.3. For the P01 on that reloading drill, I've got 1 shot dead center through the heart, so that's 3, 5, 7, and 1 here makes 8. So not bad on that drill, but obviously I'm hitting just a little bit low. If these shots were up here, those would all be heart shots. Next, we have a 15-yard stage. From here, on initiation of my shot timer, I'm fire 5 shots to the body of the target as fast as I think I can accurately fire those shots. Let's see what happens. There's 5 down range, and I definitely can't see them from here. Got to go take a look. Oh, and 6.42 seconds, 6.42 seconds for those 5 shots. That was a pretty nice stage for the P01. Got 3 heart shots, so 3, 6, 9. I've got this one just off the heart. It didn't quite make it to the line. So 11 and 13 for the P01 from 15 yards. And finally for the P01, 5 shots to the body of the target from a distance of 25 yards. Again, the tempo is as fast as I think I can accurately fire these shots. Time was 8.74 seconds, 8.74. Considering the P01 has, I think, a 3.7-inch barrel and an attendantly short sight radius, I think this is pretty darn good from 25 yards. I've got 1 good 3-point heart shot. I've got 2 good 2-point lung shots. So there's 3, 5, 7, 8, 9 points for the P01 from that distance of 25 yards. And there's a final look at the accuracy I was able to achieve with the P01 on both targets throughout the entire exercise. Time to give the P09C Nocturne a chance. First up again is going to be controlled pairs from 5 yards. Let's see what happens. Bad trigger pull on that first shot with the P09C. That's more like it. 1.53, and I did not get the time for that first one. I'll have to check my timer and figure out what it is later. I'll flash it up on the screen. And 1.55. Other than that first really horrible shot, everything else is looking pretty good. Let's walk up to the target. This is the risk I run when I switch from one handgun to another and I don't do any dry firing. I thought these triggers are close enough, I probably wouldn't need to do any of that. I could move right into shooting the P09C, and my very first shot was horrible. After that, everything looks very good. So I've got 5 of the 6 shots on the heart, that's 15 points, and a 1-point shot right there makes it 16. Next up, the 5-yard multiple adversary drill with the P09C. Let's see what happens here. .42, 4.42. Again, I had a sucky first double action pull with the P09C, and after that, everything was good. I've got 2 good heart shots here on target number 1. I've got 3 good heart shots over here on target number 2. So that's 6, and 9 is 15, and 1 is 16. 7-yard failure drills for the P01C, times 3. Here we go. .96, 2.96. And a really slow 4.48. Accuracy looked pretty good. And 2.47. Speeded it up a little bit that time. With the P09C on the failure drills, I've got 3 good heart shots, so there's 3, 6, 9 points. 3 good lung shots, so that's 11, 13, 15. And I've got 3 good 3-point shots up here, so that's a total of 24 for the P09C on those failure drills. And it's time for the 7-yard reloading drill with the P09C. .91, 5.91 on that drill. On that reloading drill, 2 good heart shots, 3, 6, and 2 1-point body shots, 1 here in the shoulder and 1 down here just below the lung, so that comes out to 8 points for the P09C on that drill. It's now time to try 5 shots to the body with the P09C from 15 yards. .6 seconds, 7.60. From 15 yards, the P09C had 1 3-point hard shot, 1 1-point body shot, so there's 4 points, 6, 8, 10 points for the P09C from 15 yards. And finally, 5 body shots from 25 yards with the P09C Nocturne. Time on that was 8.21, 8.21. Folks, if you saw this shot appear when I started to fire that sequence and you wondered where it came from, I actually started to fire it once before, but I had forgotten to reload, so I had 1 round in the chamber of the P09C, and I started the drill and fired that round, and then I could not complete the drill. So I had to stop, reload, and then fire it out correctly, which is what you just saw. So this one does not count. These 5 shots are all from that drill that I just fired. And for some reason I'm pulling these off to the left a little bit. I've got 1 good 3-point heart shot, and then I've got 4 2-point lung shots. So we add that all together and it's 2, 4, 6, 8, and 3 makes 11 for the P09C from that distance of 25 yards. Here's a final look at the targets and the accuracy I was able to achieve with the P09C Nocturne. And I'll probably do a split screen and show you this target side by side with the one that I shot with the P01. But I am going to calculate all the points from each of the drills. I am going to figure in the time penalty for both handguns, and we'll meet back at the shop and I'll reveal which of these 2 handguns won our new versus old contest today. We are back in the shop with the 2 contestants from today's video, and what I'm going to do, since this is already a fairly long video, I'm not going to do an analytical breakdown of each stage of the test as I sometimes do. Rather, what I'm going to do is flash up on the screen some charts that have all the information from each of the stages, and those of you who are interested in that information, if you have questions, hit me up in the comments section. After I get done showing the charts, I'll come back and reveal who the winner was from today's contest. As you might expect with 2 such similar firearms, when the gun smoke cleared out on the range, the test results ended up being very, very close. At the end of the shooting, the P01 had a numeric score of 82. That's the score from all 6 stages added together. The P09C had a numeric score of 85. So that 1 miss on the failure drill with the P01 definitely did impact its score. However, when I computed the time penalty, which was the elapsed time for each drill in each stage, the P01 came out with a total elapsed time of 34.12 seconds, and the P09C came out with a total elapsed time of 40.71. So those are the time penalties for each pistol respectively that is subtracted from the numeric score. And when that's done, the P01 came out with a total adjusted score of 47.88, and the P09C came out with a total adjusted score of 44.29. So the P01, the old contestant this time around, actually won this contest, and I think that's tremendous. In shooting them side by side or one after the other, I can definitely say that The shooting experience with the P01 is a little smoother, and I can't really explain why, other than maybe it's got to do with this fabulous grip design, or maybe it's got something to do with the slightly larger, heavier, and maybe a little bit blockier slide of the P09C, or maybe the difference in the lockup. As I said, the P01 has the older sort of 1911 style lockup with a lug on the barrel that matches a corresponding groove or notch in the slide, whereas the lockup on the P09C simply locks the barrel hood into the slide and lockup is accomplished that way. So I don't know. All I can say is the P01 definitely seemed to shoot more smoothly than the P09C. It also has a superior trigger to the P09C, at least for now. I've been doing a lot of dry firing with the 09C, and the trigger pull has smoothed out considerably from when I first took it out of the box. I've got about 3,000 dry fire cycles on this at this point, and I can definitely feel a difference now as opposed to when I very first started working with it. When I get another 3,000 dry fire cycles on there, it might be even that much more smooth. And I'm also considering doing an upgrade to the springs on the 09C. I haven't decided completely whether I'm going to do that or not. One of my fears always is that if I put a lighter mainspring or hammer spring onto a pistol, that I might start to get light primer strikes and misfires, and I don't want that because this is a defensive handgun and I carry this pretty routinely now. So, as I said, I haven't made up my mind on that yet, but I can say definitely that the trigger on the older P01, which has not been modified at all, is superior to the newer 09C. There you have it. In today's new versus old contest, the old contestant came away the victor. And that's going to do it for today's video. If you have any questions or comments about this video, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember, stop by my website, hrfunk.com, check out the news and information page, see all the latest things going on with me and the channel, and go by the products page because a lot of the products that I've reviewed have links on that page, and there's information beneath some of those links that'll save you some money if you decide to make a purchase. See you next time, folks. And until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.